But Kim is Vice President, Information Technology, Farm Bureau Insurance of Michigan. Be sure and watch his interview on on the site. He's been doing this, gosh, for we went over that in your interview. You've been doing this for a few years, right, Kim?
A long time.
And over at Farm Bureau, if you don't know Farm Bureau, I may say this again in the beginning. Farm Bureau of Michigan, it's part of a huge. It's like like Blue Cross where they're all connected, and they're all the farm bureaus are connected. I think you told me it's altogether second or third largest insurance in the country. It's like
Yes.
a big secret, like nobody knows except all the farmers, quietly tilling. So, but your topic that you're going to talk about today is all about leadership development. What's worked for me, meaning you, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and it's kind of I got from our interview, it's kind of important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally it's our responsibility to bring people with us and to help them grow and develop, and certainly be able to be a voice at the table that gives advice and counsel. And I think leadership development is a never-ending journey.
How you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Yeah, we are in Lansing, Michigan, right in the
Lance.
center of the state.
Yeah, right there. Okay, great. So for those of you who don't know, I think I may have said it earlier that for our audience is, for those of you who don't know, the Farm Bureau group of insurance companies, what do you tell me, what the second or third largest
Yeah,
in the
we would,
country?
right. If the Farm Bureau companies combined together, we would be the second or third largest insurer in the nation.
Wow, that's huge. I tell you, until you and I started talking, you joined our board of advisors, we started talking, we did the interview with you. I had no idea. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So, and your role, of course, is all of IT, right? CIO, IT,
Correct.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
So when we did our interview, and by the way, if you haven't seen the interview, I always say, please go watch the interview. At the end of this, I'll show you where. Please watch in the board of advisors section of our website. It's a great interview. Kim already shared a lot of, I would say, hard-earned lessons learned. Right, but he'll share a few more today. In fact, he was so excited about this series. He sent me like, Alex, here's 5 different topics we can talk about over the next 6 months. I'm like, great, you're in. So hopefully you'll like this. I think you will. But be sure and watch that interview. And just as a little background, I'm just going to look at his LinkedIn profile here, which, by the way, in the site there's a link just to connect with him. And if anybody's in sales watching this, just go easy here. Just it's really for peers and stuff.
Thank you,
Don't
Alex. Thank you.
warn these guys. So, anyways, you've been at Farm Bureau, Michigan for 9 years, but also some solid training at PwC. You were there for a number of years. But what I found really interesting when we spoke is you were originally in business, and you were actually in the claims. You were manager of IT business before services. Sorry, I'm going too fast. At State Auto, so you actually learned the business on the I don't see it here. The what's it? It
Yeah.
wasn't a.
Yeah, on the underwriting side,
Thank you. I was looking for
on the
that word.
business operations side, yes.
Boom, boom. It's there in there somewhere. I got to shake it around, find it. Thank you. So yeah, that I find really interesting, and I am seeing that trend more and more as I interview more people, where business people they start to liaison with IT, and then all of a sudden the CEO goes, "Hey, maybe you should run this thing," because kind of interesting. So today, why are we talking about leadership development? What does this mean to you?
Yeah, kind of like I said, I think it's so critical for us on two fronts.
Yeah.
One, we have to be able to develop our employees and our managers and grow and improve their skills and abilities.
Hmm.
But we also have to be able to improve our abilities so that we're at the table to help think through, help plan through, be part of strategy for the organization that we serve, and to be able to really understand things and articulate things in a way that helps move initiatives forward.
Hmm. Just to give people a perspective, how many people overall in the company, and how many people in your group are you actually, including consultants and everything,
Yeah.
that you actually manage?
Yeah, overall for the company itself, we have a little bit more than 2,500 employees, captive agents, their staff members, et cetera. And then for the IT organization is direct employees, 130 employees, then about 150, 165 when you weave in the consulting pieces of it.
Yeah. So it's I would call that a big shop. Listen, I visited Allstate. They have 1,000 people. It's not you're not that low yet, but still, once you get over 25, or some number, there's some magic number where you just can't talk to everybody. So you have to have a system through management, your team of management, to help everybody, right? So
Correct. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I really was actually impressed. Every time I've talked to you, you've really had this attitude about helping people. So let's get into it. And so what I did here is I took your questions, and we'll have you or me read the chart and just tell your story for
Okay.
each one. That's what it sounded like you wanted to do. We could talk about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And the first thing that I talk about is that for us to be an effective leader, we've got to understand ourselves. We've, sort of, so to speak, we've got to put ourselves on the couch and be our own psychologists and assess ourselves, but genuinely understand, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, because it's important that we find people that complement us. We don't need or shouldn't have everyone that's the same or thinks in a similar way as us. It's really important to have those diverse perspectives and opinions. And then to really understand what motivates you, what moves you, and how do you leverage that as part of your role. Those are really critical things. I have this saying, it's sort of a horrible saying, but I think it helps paint the picture that as people and as a leader of your IT division, as a leader in the company, we have to be able to say, why is our baby ugly? So why am I ugly? What are the weaknesses that I have? What are the challenges I have? And when you say it like that, it's really hard to think about saying my baby is ugly.
Yeah.
But we have to be objective about the strengths, the weaknesses, the blemishes that are present. And sometimes our baby is ugly.
I did not expect that one from you. You know what? I don't think you have to say that. I'm going to say, if you've got a baby out there, if your kids or your cousin's baby, so ain't like people material yet, don't say it. Just say how beautiful they are. But getting back to work, I think you're saying you got to be real with what you really,
You got
what
to be
you're
real. Yeah.
with your business, your process, or your how the team's working, or anything, right? Yeah. So I love that. It's good. So know your personal strengths and weaknesses. But let me ask you why. Why is this so important?
Yeah, kind of like I said, you've got to understand what are your greatest strengths, because you want to leverage those. We're all made differently. We all
Yeah.
have different skills and abilities, and our strengths are really the foundation of who we are as a person. And
Hmm.
so really leverage those. And then on the weaknesses, I kind of look at it of focus on one or two things that you want to be better at and really work to improve your abilities in that area, or to be able to minimize that as a blind spot that you may have as you're assessing things. Because if we're not able to do that, we're not able to understand our effectiveness. We're not able
Oh,
to understand how people see us. We're not able to really be able to make that difference, which is so important for us in our roles.
I like that. So knowing your blind spots, I get that, and what maybe even some of the triggers that you might have.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, I because I guarantee you, everybody else is going to figure out what those triggers are. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 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 Great. That's a good one. All right. That's one. What's this one? So
Yeah.
go
So,
ahead. You say it. Yeah.
yeah. So surround yourself with people you can trust and people with different strengths and weaknesses. It's so important that you have a rounded IT leadership team. One of the things we did was the Clifton Strength Finders, and we profiled the top 32 strengths of every leader, actually every employee in our company. And we ran profiles to see what are our key strengths, what are areas where I may have a weakness that somebody else has
Hmm.
that strength, because we can then really leverage that person in those situations where that may not be the best thing that you're able to do. And also, it's important, there's no right answer in technology. There's maybe some better answers than others, but we need to understand the gray. And in order to understand the gray, we need to hear from people that see things and think about things differently. And so I just think it's so important for us to embrace that. And you may have people that are total opposites of you that may drive you crazy, but you've got to kind of swallow that and think, this is a person that can help me. How am I
Hmm.
going to leverage them? They're an asset. How do I leverage that asset? And at the end of the day, the better we're able to do that, the better the organization moves forward as a whole.
It's interesting. So I would say, given that, you'd be a big advocate of diversity
Yeah,
in many ways,
yeah,
right?
very, very much so. It's so important. And I think maybe when you're younger and you're just starting your career, the tendency may be to have people around you that think very similar to you.
Uh-huh.
Um, at the end of the day, that's not going to help you grow as much as you need to grow or be as effective as you need to be. And so really broadening that horizon, is important. The Gladwell book Blink is a great book to read,
What's it called?
and it's called Blink.
Blink.
And you form impressions of people so quickly,
Yeah.
um, but really understanding and learning more about that person, you can be amazed how they can assist and what their capabilities are.
Interesting. Interesting. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, especially for an organization which most of the people watching these kind of episodes are going, their organization is going to affect a lot of people. And clearly, whatever you're doing is going to affect others, especially, insurance. That's so many obvious examples. So, you know, having those different people around you that are making sure that as many of the needs of your customers are taken care of in the right way is probably a very healthy thing, I would imagine.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Good. Good. That's good. All right. What's next?
So one of the things I did when I first started at the company is I put down on paper 7 questions
Oh.
that I wanted to ask. And I emailed those questions in advance, but I met with every person, every employee in the division to ask them those questions. And kind of among those were, what do you see that we do best? What do you
Hmm.
see that concerns you? How are we doing with developing you as a person? What's one change you would recommend that we could make as an organization? And really getting to understand and learn people and know their thoughts is important. And then with our managers, every week we take a topic, and it may be an issue that's facing the organization. It may be something that happened that didn't go as well as we wanted it to, and we talk about it from the standpoint of what happened and how do we learn from it. And I think it's important, we as leaders are vulnerable. I often will ask, what did I do that I could
Hmm.
have done better? What could I
Really?
have done different? And really be open and true that you want that feedback, but it just helps so much in growing. And when I went through and talked with 130 people,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there were some really strong common themes that we were able to boil things down. And that helped me as I was first getting started in this role to really help move the organization forward in a way that also help people understand their opinion matters. They're going to be able to have an impact. You do want to understand what they're thinking.
So you did that when you first took over the role? You literally talked to every single person
Yes. Yeah.
in your group? Wow. How long did that take?
Yeah, it took a few months. I
Yeah,
scheduled a few, a few a day or a few throughout the week, but it took a
yeah,
couple months to get through to people. And most people were open, as being IT people, and
yeah,
I'm an introvert. I can say this. Some were really quiet, and you have to just be okay with that.
yeah.
It's just the intent, and part of it was an
Good point.
opportunity for them to see, like, it's important you're real in that moment so they can be vulnerable with you. They can tell you, well, this sucks because of this. You want to hear the raw information that's present.
That's interesting. And how often do you still do that?
Yeah, I don't do it as much with all of the employees, but I do it on a regular basis. I'd say at least twice a year, I'm talking to every manager individually
Uh-huh.
about what are they seeing, what's happening, where they at with them, and that I just think that's so important.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's great. Well, let's keep moving. What I want to do is, folks in the audience, if you have a question, don't forget on any of these. Otherwise, we'll just keep going because I think these are great. I'm going to read these because I just realized this is going to be audio for the podcast also, and they may not see the screen. So the next quote is, I am a believer in servant-based leadership. It's part of the fabric of who I am as a person and what works for me. So go ahead, Kim. That's a great, I love that.
Yeah, and first I want to say, I think this is where I go back to that first point of really knowing your strengths and what moves you.
Uh-huh.
For me, throughout my life, for whatever reason, I just was a person that wanted to be able to help other people. And when I
Hmm.
first read the Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Yeah.
which is dated at this point, but I felt like that book was written for me and was talking directly to me because it aligns so much with what I think and how I feel. I think it's so important that we seek to understand. I think it's so important that we list out what our weaknesses are, what our challenges are that we bring to the table. I
Hmm.
think it's important that we understand, how can I help you as an employee or as a leader, and really make a difference with you so that you can then help us collectively move forward.
Hmm.
And for me, it's just part of the fabric of who I am.
That's awesome. And when did you read that? I mean, how many years ago did you read that? Like
Oh my
20 some years
gosh.
ago? Like, was it like,
Yeah,
it was
it
like
was.
30 years? I don't even know when it came out.
Yeah,
I remember reading
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was right about 30 years ago at this
Yeah.
point. And then at that point, I worked at Allstate Insurance, and we
Hmm.
actually did the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People training as
The
an
training.
organization. And we
Yeah.
really went through and invested quite a bit in it from a leadership development perspective. And it just was so powerful, um, and, really connected with me.
God, that's awesome. I mean, I remember I read his book a couple times, and I used to go to the Covey stores. I don't know if they still had them, and they had the Covey training.
Yeah, yeah.
You did the training. I never, right now, like I still follow Brian Tracy, who was kind of around the same time, and he's still very going strong. But I remember that. But how did that tie to servant-based leadership? Tell us about that. When did you first learn about servant-based leadership? Because I just recently, only in the last few years, got turned on to that myself.
Yeah, it really was part of that, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even something, Alex, that I just really carried with me,
Mm-hmm.
that I felt that part of my role isn't just to lead, but part of my role is to serve other people.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about the CEO and I think about our company, I'm focused on, how can I help him? What is it that we're doing? How can I serve them to make a deeper difference. And what is it that our people are going through that they're facing, whether personal or from a business perspective? And what can we do to make that better for them? Because at the end of the day, they're going to be more effective and more
Mhm.
committed for you for what you're trying to do. But you can't do it from I want to manipulate that person. You've got to do it because you really care and you want to understand how do you help that person.
Right. I mean, I'll make a confession here. I mean, I grew up. Okay, I was trained to be a consultant, CPA, IT consulting, but then I went into sales, and they train you to manipulate people. I mean, you know, there's a principle called solution selling, and the way solution selling works is you find the pain. They literally said, dig the knife in. Oh, how big of a problem is this? What would happen if the CEO found out about that? Oh my God. Oh my God, you better fix this, you know. Almost like on a comedy or something. But that's really how they trained you. And it took years. I'll tell you, it took a long time to overcome that training. Where where I mean, you still have to ask similar questions like how big is the
Yeah,
problem and things like
yeah,
that. But it's how you do it and what your intent is.
yeah.
I think
And
that's the
it's
key.
amazing, it's
Yeah.
amazing, Alex. People will pick up like that. Is this real or is this
Yes.
the sales approach that's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah.
And
You
so,
know when
it's just
someone's selling to you. You know it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's a good insight, Kim. Absolutely. So anybody that's in sales watching this, come on, folks, the gig is out. Do what Kim said and just be there to help people. And it doesn't mean you sit there and listen to someone's problems for 2 hours and if they're
right.
not gonna if they're not really interested in what you're doing. But that's uh that's another sales executive. This is a great. I love servant-based leadership. I've read a lot about it only recently, and we're going to do a servant-based event for our audience. I think it'll be very helpful to people. And I've talked to other people about it, and I know that it got hot in development for a while. When Agile came out and
Yeah.
everything else, that's when it got kind of hot in IT. Obviously, there are people that were already involved in it. All right, that's a great one. Thank you for sharing that one. All right, I'm just going to read it unless you want to. Why don't you read it?
Yeah. Never stop reading, learning about leadership. Leadership has no end, no destination. It is a journey in and of itself.
Wow. I mean, I could put a journey tune to that. That would be like a song. That's awesome. Did you write that? Where did that come from?
That came from me. That
Yeah, that's
that's
really
that's
awesome.
me.
So you're taking the whole, journey concept and focusing on what you do, which is being a leader, an IT
Right.
executive, right?
Right. And it goes back like what I was talking about is with our leadership team, we read books collectively together and we'll talk about the
Hmm.
topics or the key principles in the book. But even more importantly, learning from experiences. We talked the other day. Do we put process over people?
Mm,
And while we didn't like the answer, there are times we put process over people. And so
absolutely.
we talked
Yeah.
about that. And there
Yeah.
are times it's right to do that, and there are times it's not good to do that.
That's right.
But that's just an example of us taking a topic and learning of, what's the situation? How do we do it? What can we do to make that better?
That's a that is such an interesting example. It's such a tough one. There are scenarios where you're going to choose the lesser of the what's the answer? The lesser of, I don't want to say two
The
evils, but
lesser of two evils, for
yeah, I don't want
lack
to
of
say
a better
that
way of saying
because you guys are an insurance company, right? People are, oh, insurance company, but at the end of the day, I mean, you all are trying to help people, but it has to be within your parameters to do it.
Yeah.
And there are going to be situations that your company has to make decisions for. And I think anybody watching this, their company is the same way. You have to be able to help people in the right way. And sometimes your company's going to make decisions that may affect them adversely, but not, but hopefully, what's the right way, in the right way, if that makes sense. Right. But back to your journey. That's really interesting because you think of and the top down, in management theory, the top down thing came from the Army, right? I've read a little bit about that, and it works in an army. By the way, if you go into war, maybe, yeah, your
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
platoon sergeant may care about you, but if he or she tells you go do that, believe me, you better go do it. Just do it, because that's something, right, Kim? So if we're getting here, though, in the corporate world or the world where people are working virtually and whatever, and they have, I think a lot more people, Kim, in today's world, we've got 6 generations working in the workforce right now. It seems like the younger generations, and they're all a little different, are, I don't know if I want to say, I don't know how to say this. They're a little more sensitive. They 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 don't seem to be, all of them. I don't know, when I was, well, for us, it was go do it, right? And we did it. And if our feelings, we didn't like it the way they said it, we didn't say anything.
Right.
So how how is that different now?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. I think by nature, people are more collaborative,
Uh,
um, and
oh,
want
that's
to be
interesting.
want to be part of that conversation. I will say, though, there are still times where you have to go do it.
Yeah,
You're facing something, something's present. But I think it's understanding when and where to leverage that, versus when and where to embrace, the bringing people with you.
yeah. I think it's great. I love this quote. So, leadership. How do you know if you're doing a good job? How do you know? It's important for you to feel good about what you're doing. How do you, at the end of every day or week, do you say, hey, yeah, I had this thing go wrong, but oh no, I did a good job. Because celebrating your own wins is kind of important. Where are those wins?
Yeah, well, and first for me, I'm really good about seeing my weaknesses, a little bit better than my strengths. But
Yeah.
no, I think it goes back to that key point of you
Uh,
need to know your strengths and weaknesses, and you need to be able to, take a day or take a week and reflect on, think about leadership, think about this past week. How would I grade myself on my leadership presence with my team,
hmm
with my corporate staff, with my CEO? What was good? What was bad? And do that reflection,
hmm
because it just helps us. And like I said, no, no pun intended, it is a journey.
Yeah.
We keep evolving. The world keeps evolving around us, and we have to evolve with it, because the conditions and the triggers and everything is changing.
Yeah. 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 Things do change, and hopefully, as you get older, you get wiser too, and maybe some of those
Yeah,
triggers don't get
yeah,
you as much.
yeah,
Hopefully. Not perfect. I'll say I learned everything about leadership from Captain Kirk. So watching him, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. We can edit that part out, right? All right. So anything, let's talk about the next one. Now you mentioned Covey
yeah. I think,
before. Go ahead
yeah,
and read that
yeah,
for us.
yeah, yeah. Look into things like the Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the Covey Speed of Trust. That's also a Covey training
Oh,
module, and then the Clifton Strength Finders. That's now through Gallup. Those are some examples that's really helped us. Speed of Trust was something we did with our leadership team, and that's a newer Covey offering, relatively speaking, and
Really?
it was helpful. Literally, like you get this little booklet that has little cards in it that you can walk around with these little cards and hold a card up about a topic related to building trust, and it makes you stop and think about, what am I doing to erode trust? What am I doing to grow trust? And so those are just examples. There are a ton out there, but my key message here was, look for sources to continue to grow leadership for yourself and for your team, and be religious and dedicated about doing it.
That's really good. So if we go through these three resources here that you recommend, you just said a couple things that I wanted to summarize because I think you said a lot there in that statement. First, Covey's 7 Habits of Effective People, and you mentioned this earlier in the conversation, but that book still works.
It does.
The principles in that book still work. And you mentioned earlier, seek first to understand and then to be understood, like as one of your
Yep.
key principles. Know your
Yep.
own strengths, that kind of thing, and
Find a
weaknesses.
win-win. Yep.
Find a win-win. Right. I was kidding around about Captain Kirk earlier, but I interviewed somebody, Patrick, who talked about the no-win scenario, that was in one of the series, and he said, I don't believe in no-win scenarios. And it comes back to what you're saying right now, which is win-win,
Yep.
and find the win-win, and all the other ones. You can look that up. But the one I hadn't heard about was speed of trust, because I haven't been following Covey as much recently. So if you were following Covey before and haven't heard it, go back and look up the speed of trust. Right? I assume it's a book also, and
It
you can
is.
read
It
it.
is.
Yeah, you could just do the book if you want. Start with that. Um, I've heard about these different personality profiles. We've heard about, what is Clifton Strength Finders? What is that?
Yeah, so what Clifton Strength Finders does is it goes through and it asks you a series of questions.
Uh-huh.
And then based on those questions, it'll rank your top 32 skill traits. And there's common categories that they use for it. And it's so interesting. Number
Mm,
one, my leadership team, we had a person with strength in every one of the 32 items, was in their top. At least one of our people had one of those boxes as their top 5 strengths. So what that meant to us is, we had a diverse team. We
mhm,
had every facet of leadership and development capabilities accounted for in at least one person.
mhm,
But it also helped us learn, like, where our weaker spots were holistically, where our strengths were holistically. But then I also knew, and our leaders knew, well, I can go talk to Bob. He's
mhm,
really good at this piece. Or
mhm.
Carol's really good at being able to do woo. Let me have her help me work on woo as part of this. I want to create this story. I need some woo
Yeah.
with this story. And so it's just really good about identifying those strengths and then really work as a group to leverage those. And then the other thing it does is it deciphers a little bit of what do those mean. And then it does talk about specific things you can do to continue to enhance those. And the thing about it was, it wasn't that you can't do that 32 the 32 rank strength you have. It's that you may have to work harder at it, or you may need to spend more time developing it. It's not that you can't do one or the other. It's what is your nature, and then what do you do to compensate for those that aren't, as that aren't in your top 5, top
Mhm.
10, etc.
Mm. That's interesting. So do they give you like a matrix that said, here's your
They do.
team, and
Yep. Yep.
and is there
Yep.
something visual that you can look
They're
at? It
they're
sounds like a baseball, like you're the baseball manager. You
Yeah.
got
You
somebody
know
who can,
what? What I
yeah.
what I can do is, when we're done, I'll kind of blank the names out. But
Oh,
Alex, I'll send you just a color picture of what it is,
yeah,
and then we can pop it up just as a reference. So I'll
yeah,
send that to you when we're done.
yeah. Because we'll be posting segments of this completely publicly for everybody, but the whole interviews and everything else after a while will be in the members area. and we'll just pop it in there. So, but for a long time, all of this will be available to everybody. So we'll figure that out. That's awesome. All right, let's go into the next one.
Yeah. Um, and maybe I have some bias here because I
Yeah.
grew up in the business, but no,
Well, let me say it. Let
we're,
me say it real quick. Uh,
sorry.
learn the business you're in, not the technology. Understand the key goals and objectives of the company, and how you can drive or influence those outcomes. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just so important that we're helping the company leverage technology. And Alex
Yes.
said this at the beginning.
Yeah.
Every company now is a technology company on some
Yeah.
form or fashion.
Yeah.
But where our voice is not going to be heard if we're talking in technical terms that people don't comprehend. We have to translate that to actions and behaviors that are going to drive our business. And so in my business, in the insurance business,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that we're doing that's going to help profitable growth? What's happening with that? What is
Mm-hmm.
it that we're doing to minimize claim expenses? What is it that we're doing to drive expenses, gain efficiencies? And talk about how the technology drives a different business outcome
Mm-hmm.
versus the technology itself.
Yeah. It's not, oh, this is super cool, even though it
Yeah,
might be.
yeah.
It really comes down to the business goals and
Well,
objectives. Yeah.
and your folks sometimes you have people that are just in love with the technology. And,
Yeah.
they're like, this is the best tool in the world. This is the one we have to use. There's never one tool we have to use. It's what's available that makes sense. What's really going to help the organization move forward. Don't be passionate about the tool, be passionate about the solution.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna repeat that. That's good. Don't be passionate about the tool. Be passionate about the solution. And it could be something really simple, right?
Yes.
In fact, elegant, I think, is the phrase, right? Or the word. Well, I'll tell you, you've been awesome. These are awesome lessons that you've shared with our community, and not just here on the show today, but we're gonna, as you know, we're gonna distribute this, and so I'm so grateful. Um, any questions that anybody has? That we got a number of people watching. They're just saying great job and thank you in the Q&A box, but no one's asking a ton of questions on any of these yet. Well, oh, what was the name of that Covey? Yeah, I'll just go back.
The,
What was
the Covey Speed of Trust,
Speed of Trust? Yeah,
and that was written by Franklin Covey. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was written by his father, Stephen Covey.
yeah, right, right. So the son took over the
Yeah,
business is
the
still going
son
through the
took over
son.
the business. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and like I said, and the strength finders is that, like you said, is that okay? Yeah, she's saying thank you. Yep. All right, and then let's see if there's anybody else. Last call for questions on that. And here's a question that servant leadership. Any books on servant leadership that you recommend?
Yeah, well,
Here, let me
I
get to that.
definitely,
Here,
yeah, I
I'll do it
definitely
again.
would
Oops, let
say,
me just do it again for the recording.
sorry.
Any books on servant leadership that you would recommend, Kim?
Yeah, the first one I would go back to and read would be the Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People,
Oh,
because I think it is still so relevant today. And then John Maxwell has a number of books that are out there, and really powerful.
yeah.
Another thing that you can look at is either videos or stories from John O'Leary. He's a person that had a horrible situation that happened to him
Mhm.
as a child, and
Oh,
talks about what you can overcome and what you can get past, and it's just really effective. And
yeah.
so just different ways of understanding how you can overcome situations that are present.
Okay, that's great. Well, you've been awesome today. And thank you for sharing on your first mentoring session. I think you did a great job. You answered a couple people's
Thank you.
questions and great insights.